Management Board. My name is Councillor Philip Roberts and I am the Chairman of the Board. Also in attendance is my Vice Chairman, Councillor Jane Smith. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live by the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online at the meeting. Recording remains on the Council's website. With this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and press watching this live. Welcome to executives, councillors, executive support councillors and members of the corporate leadership team who are attending our meeting today. There was no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the chamber and exit the building via the front doors and congregate in the car park at the front of the building, where we will await further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and tablets are on silent for the duration of this meeting. The hearing loop is now activated. A request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand and the Vice Chairman will make a note. We will now move on to the formal agenda of this meeting. Apologies for absence and replacement members. Rachel, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. We don't have any apologies today.
Excellent. Declarations of any members' interests. Do we have any members wish to declare an interest? That's a no. Minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of June 2026. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the 25th of June 2026. This can be found on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. The minutes are not for debate, but to agree that they are a correct and accurate record of the previous meeting. If you have any questions on the content of the minutes, please contact the officers attending the meeting. Do I have a proposer? Councillor French. Seconder, Councillor Collier. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct record. Thank you. Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. I have no announcements to make apart from welcome back after the summer break. Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any announcements from the Executive Councillors present today? That's a no. Chief Officer announcements. Are there any Chief Officer announcements? Heather, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a brief update on LGR, just to give everybody the position. So we're expecting the draft structural changes order in autumn ahead of it going to Parliament and coming into law. This SCO will confirm the names of the new councils, which we're expecting to be Lincoln and Lincolnshire. And the election arrangements will be set out for next May's elections to the shadow authorities. In the meantime, the Chief Executives of Lincolnshire's existing councils are working together to establish the implementation programme team and to plan the transition and establish the necessary governance arrangements, and also to make sure that residents continue to receive high quality services throughout the process. You may have seen that the Council has sent a pre-action protocol letter to the Government. There were concerns about the government process and questions around how the decisions made and how the consultation results were taken into account. So this is a chance for Government to answer those questions. The pre-action protocol letter doesn't automatically mean that we will be launching any kind of legal challenge, and we are still continuing to work in readiness for LGR with the districts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Heather. Consideration of call-ins. Rachel, are there any call-ins to consider?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Consideration, councillors, for call of action.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. On to item number 7, Council Plan Performance Framework 2026-27, Quarter 1. This report can be found on pages 17 to 106 of the agenda pack and is for pre-decision scrutiny. The board is being consulted on the Council Plan Performance Framework of 26-27 for Quarter 1. The report is due for consideration by the Executive at its meeting on the 1st of September 2026. All comments from the board will be reported to the Executive prior to its decision. The actions required by the board are to review and scrutinise the attached report for the Executive. The report will be presented by Caroline Jackson, Head of Corporate Performance Team. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, as you've outlined, this is a Q1 performance report against the new council plan. Within your pack, as we've said, you'll see Appendix A, which is the report to the executive, but also supported by Appendix 1, which is all of the key performance indicators and their data, comparative and the narrative against their targets. It's also what you'll see on the council website as part of the Power BI reporting, interactive reporting. Appendix 2 is all of the underpinning activities and their milestone updates for Q1. And Appendix 3 is where we have made some small minor changes to the Council Plan Success Framework, performance framework, as agreed by the Executive on the 9th of June, just while we've been going through this process of Q1 reporting. I'll briefly summarise Q1. In terms of the report itself, there is strong performance across all the areas of family, community and county. In terms of family, we are seeing strong performance in relation to fewer young adults having their long-term support needs met through an admission to residential and nursing homes. However, we are also seeing an area for improvement is around people aged 18 and over requiring an assessment of occupational therapy or a Care Act assessment. There is a waiting list and we are prioritising those on a risk and urgency basis. We are continuing to strengthen staffing levels to address the demand, and we do expect that to be closer to its target in Q2. Whilst we haven't achieved the target we set for children in care living in a family environment, we continue to promote family-based care wherever it's appropriate, ensuring children are placed in the most suitable setting. However, we are aware that many young people choose to live in supported accommodation when they reach the ages of 16 or 17. All of the activities in this area are progressing as planned. In community, we see good performance across all of the metrics reported. We do have 2 amber-rated activities within community. The first relates to activity A14. This is because of the Gold Award for Defence Recognition Scheme is to be acquired by Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue. Because of the proposed changes around local government reorganisation, they cannot achieve that as part of Lincolnshire County Council because of the timeline involved. However, there is an ongoing commitment that Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue will continue to work towards that award, but we felt it was fair to rate that amber rated. In terms of activity A19, this relates to training sessions that should have been provided for the Lincolnshire Ready for Anything emergency volunteer pool, but weren't delivered due to poor uptake and attendance. In terms of county, as often seen, and those familiar, we do get a mixed level of performance across our waste metrics. However, collectively, we believe this indicates that there is a strong management of the waste hierarchy and that we're seeing positive progress in prevention, recycling and landfill diversion. But obviously a number of metrics within the report around waste. In terms of supporting businesses, we feel it's a strong performance shown. The businesses are actually taking the commissioned business support services. They are exceeding their targets, so showing again strong engagement where support is available. We do have an amber-rated activity, A44, which was around the protection and enhancement of heritage sites. This actually relates to a milestone in Q1 around Lincoln Museum, where the final contractor works were due to be signed off in Q1, but actually has slipped into Q2, but that will be signed off imminently, but was amber rag rating. After today, we will share hopefully a helpful user guide for members to navigate around the council website, but I will hand over now. I've kept it brief for any questions.
Thank you, Caroline. Any questions? Councillor Davis.
Thank you for the summary. That was really useful. I'd be keen to understand PI7 a little bit more. Could you give us some background as to what the kind of assessments are waiting? Typically, how long are people behind? What's kind of going on there? Just to fill it out a little bit, because we're talking 70% shy of target, aren't we? So it's quite significant.
So, Chair, if I can pick that up. So the position is that we need to divide this into really 3 categories of people. There are people who are waiting for an initial assessment of their Care Act needs. So essentially, someone approaches the council and says, "I haven't been in contact with you before. I'm struggling now. we need to do an assessment of their needs and work on whether they have Care Act eligible needs or not, and then if they do, to address those. A second category is people who are existing in the system, and we are meant to do an annual review to see, well, are things okay or not, and then make changes as may be appropriate on the basis of that. And then a third category is people who are waiting for occupational therapy assessment. So essentially, do they need some kit in there or adaptations in their homes? I have been deliberately focusing the team on people who are waiting for a first assessment. So people who approach us who aren't receiving care and are approaching us, I'm making sure that we get to them quickly. So we effectively have work in hand, but we don't have a waiting list for people for a first assessment. I've been allowing the waiting list for people who are in the system for them to have a review. I've been allowing that waiting list to grow a little bit on the basis that those are lower risk individuals. So essentially, if you're in the system already, there is a carer who is seeing you every day. So a professional, qualified, trained person sees you every single day. And if there is an issue or a change in your situation, that person can say, oh, I think we've got an issue here. Can you do a review? And we'll do a review. What we find is that people where we're just doing the review on a planned basis, something like 3/4 of those reviews lead to no action of any kind. There's no change, nothing has moved on with the individual, their existing care package is fine. So I'm allowing the waiting list for people for planned reviews to grow a little so that I can focus the staff on people who need a first assessment, working on the basis that we have a robust process in place to risk assure the people who are waiting for planned reviews that if there is a change, then we will see them very quickly and we'll address them. With the occupational therapists, we've seen a little bit of an increase in the waiting list for people to be reassessed. So they've already had something done in their home. We're now going back to check, is that quite the thing? So again, we have a risk assessed approach. So it's really trying to make best use of the limited staffing capacity that I've got, and making sure that we're not doing reviews where we're just doing the review because we're supposed to do a review. We're doing reviews where it's going to make a difference to the care for someone, so it is very carefully risk assessed.
Thank you, Martin. Would you like to come back?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I suppose my follow-up question would be, are we looking at a blip, a surge, or is there a requirement, do you think, to be doing more permanent in this area? You know, is there a resource implication that you're going to be looking at?
So we are making sure that we are changing the thrust of the approach of how we do social work, essentially. So we had been in a position where we perhaps were a bit reactive. So people would come into the system, we would provide them a care package, and then we would see what happens. We're now very much working in a territory of trying to maintain people's independence longer so that they have less need. So the way that I'm seeking to address the pressure of demand is, rather than growing the staff cohort to respond to the demand, I'm focusing the staff on preventative activity so the demand never arises in the first place. And it's clearly much better for an individual not to have that crisis, not to have that difficulty that causes them to come into the social care system. And so therefore, if I can work with people before they have a Care Act eligible need, so that through information, advice and guidance, they can do things off their own bat that enable them to maintain their independence for longer, that is the way for me to deal with demand, and that will therefore lead to reduced demand, and I'll then have the right staffing in order to be able to manage the people who are in the system. So I don't want to put effort in people who are in the system already to do reviews that won't benefit them. I want to put the effort into preventing people to avoiding people needing to come into the system in the first place.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Thank you for the report. My question is around PI 15, percentage of children in care living in care in a family environment is at 77% at the moment. What are we doing proactively to try and increase that? Do you think that will increase, or do you think we're going to stay where we are or get lower? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that one. So I think that the placement mix between residential and family-based care is really challenging at the minute. I think that's an area that we're working really hard on. We've seen some really good progress. So we recruited 17 new foster care households since April. That includes some of the focused foster carers who are going to take some of our more complex children and avoid them going into residential placements. And it also included some foster carers who were working for independent fostering agencies who've chosen to come and work for the council. So we've had a really clear strategy around increasing foster carers, which is working. And the problem is that demand on top of that means we are still placing more into residential. And you'll notice in the budget papers later that that's having a costly impact as well. So we are doing a lot of work to increase the number of foster carers we have. We're also actively using our independent fostering agency market more. So it's not a market we've had to use historically, but we're actively working with the independent fostering agencies more and utilising them and being strategic about using those places when we've got them and protecting our own places for when we need more urgent places as well. So it's a really mixed picture. So what I would say is, you know, if you were just asking me how we're doing on foster care and recruitment, I would be able to tell you we're doing really well. You know, compared to the East Midlands, compared to the other figures, we're doing really well. But it is not well enough to stop the demand that we're seeing, see an increase in the residential provision as well. Where do I think that's going to go? I think it's going to be a tricky year. I think you'll see that in the projections we've put in for this year. I think we are going to continue to really push on the family base, continue to push on the foster care recruitment, to push government on the offer to foster carers nationally, as well as look at the offer to foster carers locally. We know we do well in retaining our foster carers, and we know that we do well in recruiting, but we need more. And, you know, as we would always do, we'd take the opportunity, if there is anyone in the chamber or listening who's interested in foster care, and please get in touch with us. There is a big need for foster carers in Lincolnshire, and we'd love to work with you.
Thank you, Heather. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm taking us back to PI 7 on page 22. Thank you for your explanation, Martin. However, you say that the waiting list of planned reviews has been allowed to grow a little bit, but that's quite a hefty miss of target. We hear it's 70%, and I'm relying on Councillor Davis's maths on this one, not mine. And the OT list has also grown a little bit. And we see on page 35 that staffing challenges have been put forward as contributing to this demand. How long have these staffing challenges existed, and how do they compare with previous figures for PI 7? And what are you doing to mitigate that?
So there's a national shortage of qualified social workers. Social workers are really difficult to recruit. Lincolnshire, for some considerable length of time, has found it difficult to recruit level 2 social workers, so experienced social workers. There are multiple reasons for that, but you know, part of the issue is the national shortage. So we've had for some time a programme of, we find it relatively straightforward to recruit people to train as social workers, and we find it relatively straightforward to train, to recruit newly qualified social workers, so level 1 social workers. So what we've been focusing on doing is recruiting people that we then train, and then recruiting level 1 social workers that we then train further so they become level 2 social workers. So effectively, rather than going to the national market to recruit level 2 social workers, we're growing our own. And we've been, over several years now, quite successful in that, but that still remains the position that level 2 social workers are difficult to get hold of, and lots of places want them, and therefore sometimes we'll lose them to go elsewhere. It is an issue, and that's why I'm focusing the resource that I've got on the initial assessments rather than reviews. So I recognise I wouldn't want those figures to be going much worse. They are compared to the rest of the region, they're actually not particularly bad. They're just not where we would want to be. But as I say, I'm focusing on making sure that the resource that I've got is focused on the highest area of risk and need. So people coming into the system in the first place where I simply don't know what their need is, and then people who are in the system where we are risk assessing and saying, well, we think there's a greater chance that this individual will need a change in their care package. And then, as I say, particularly focusing on the prevention side of things, because it's much better if someone never has the need in the first place, because then they'll never need to be reviewed. But I think none of this is new. These have been things we've been dealing with over the last several years or so. You get blips in the process over time.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Corey.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just as a quick supplementary, do you think it's working? Are you satisfied that you moving your stuff around, that you've actually now got the things in place for you to be able to mitigate and to assess those young people who you think actually have the greatest need? Are you happy with that?
I would like it to be working faster. We've looked very carefully at the situation. We don't think there's anything that we're not doing that we should be doing. I think the issue is that there's a mismatch between the supply of social workers nationally and the number of people who are wanting to come into the system. So I think this is going to be a challenge for us. There's no suggestion that there's anything where we really ought to be doing something, but we're not. And I think the CQC inspection was pretty clear as well, that we know what we need to do. We're doing what we need to do. It will have the impact. It has been having impact, but there's further to go.
Thank you, Martin. Actually, for a position of clarity, how long does it take to train a social worker on level 1 to get them to a level 2?
It's normally about 2 years.
Thanks. I think it was worth asking the question. Thank you very much. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Hope you've had a good summer. It's over. So they say. It rained this morning, didn't it? Thank you. I'm interested in the questions so far, and I welcome the fact, are all on Martin's services, services that affect the lives of people most. And they're all questions I would have sort of raised. But I'm interested in the trends, really. And, you know, on the, it looks quite stark, the not meeting the target on PI7, you know, those 18 and over on a waiting list for assessments. I think I'm really asking what Lindsay asked, and I'm not sure I heard it, Martin, but, you know, what is the trend? What was it last year? I did look in the papers further on with my magnifying glass, but I still couldn't sort of get the trend. I'm not sure if it was meant to be in there, if that's year on year. I couldn't actually, you know, my eyes with my glasses and my magnifying glass still didn't sort of give me it. So that's that. On the NEETs, the 16, 17-year-olds not in employment, education and training, I note that we're better than the East Midlands and better than England. And obviously it's a big national problem. We know that over 1 million NEETs currently. But we seem to be on target. I just wondered why is Lincolnshire bucking the trend there, and why would that be, perhaps? And then on the percentage of children in care within a family accommodation environment, I really welcome what Heather said, that you've recruited some 14. Doesn't sound that many, to be honest. I was 17. Oh, right, it's gone up. But it recruited some more foster carers. That's really excellent, providing they're the right kind of people, and I'm sure that they're checked to make sure they are. I mean, foster carers provide, in my view, you know, a fantastic value for money service, and you know, the more children in care that we can get into a family, it's a win-win, isn't it, on economy and you know, the welfare of that child and their future prospects. I remember, you know, going back 20 odd years, I've probably said it before, I remember being appalled when I realised, when I asked questions in this chamber, how much we paid foster carers or gave them a allowance towards the costs of raising the children that they do. And it was, to my shame, it was actually less than I was getting as a county councillor for my allowance. I don't know what it is now, and I'm not particularly asking that, but it just does highlight to me the value for money that foster carers offer. I'll shut up then, but I've probably got some questions on when we get further in on recycling particularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
In terms of
Caroline.
responding to, PI7, on page 35 of your pack shows the comparative information. So the orange bars are Lincolnshire's figures. We go back a number of years. The sort of pale blue show the East Midlands comparators. So you'll see the latest East Midlands comparator we have for Q4. We only get those annually. But you can see obviously there has been an increase from the end of Q4 to Q1, and that has been obviously, you can see that increase has been steady over the last 2 years. We still are below though the East Midlands comparator that as at the end of Q4. So that's page 35.
Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, if I come in on the NEETs next, Councillor Dilks, is that okay? So on the NEETs, I think we are doing well. I think we've got an element of unknown, which we're working really hard to resolve as well, and I want to be transparent about that, but I think that is that's something that we're working on. But we are doing relatively well. What I think I would say is that those national concerns about employment still stand in Lincolnshire, because if you look at employment for 18 to 24-year-olds in the wider demographic, that's still an issue that we're grappling with. So the NEET data is positive, but it doesn't change the fact that the employment 18 to 24, we've got the same challenges that are seen nationally, and it needs to continue to be a target.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of adult care questions. First one is on performance indicator 9, percentage of adults aged 18 above who receive direct payments. I firstly note that we are historically a very strong performer in this field, and I think the second chart there shows that we are, on the comparators chosen, we are top of the list. Obviously there's been now a decline in performance, which in the trend which Councillor Dilks just mentioned, there is a definite decline in performance. So just the question is what's happening and what's being done about it?
So the decline is deliberate policy. The decline is a deliberate policy. So direct payments are a good thing. That doesn't mean to say that more direct payments are a better thing. What has become very clear is that we have on occasion been hitting the target and missing the point. We've been encouraging people to have a direct payment when actually a direct payment isn't the right thing for the individual. So we've had situations where people who don't have capacity have a direct payment, and they then have to employ a company to manage that payment for them. So LCC, which has a very strong payment capacity strength, is paying another organisation to do in effect exactly the same thing, but for people who've chosen to take a direct payment. So there's no benefit to the individual. Somebody else is is managing the payment for them. It's just that it's a third party as opposed to the county council. So we've identified that that's simply not good value for money. So we've been looking for cases in that situation and moving those individuals back onto managed payments. We've also been finding a number of instances where people have a direct payment and then they've been using that direct payment to buy services from providers that the council already has a contract with. And when they're buying those services as an individual, they are unable to access the preferential rates that the county council, through its bulk purchasing, is able to buy from those providers. So again, the county council is paying an individual to buy a service that we already buy, but at higher price. So what we've been looking to do is to make sure that all of those situations where there's no actual benefit to the individual from having a direct payment, we're simply introducing higher cost and more bureaucracy. we're working through and taking those payments out and putting people back onto managed payments. They get exactly the same service, it just costs the county council less. And that is leading to a small reduction in the number of direct payments. As you say, we remain way ahead of most other councils, so it's getting the proportion at the right level, rather than simply saying a direct payment is a good thing, therefore if more people have them, that must be better. And that's simply not the case. We've identified some people are not benefiting, but it's costing the county council more money.
Can I come back on that, please?
Yes, Councillor Hill.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree, because the whole principle of direct payments is giving people control of their own budgets as opposed to Big Brother Council deciding for them. And as you well know, there's been a case in my patch where it hasn't worked, and whether it's because of the system. So I suppose the obvious question, I understand the logic what you're saying, well, why set a target then which you're deliberately not hitting? And I suppose the other concern I've got is in the narrative. It says, although this target remains, although it remains below the stated target, the measure is recorded as achieved. Well, you either have a target or you don't have a target, and you can't say we haven't hit the target, that's all right, because, you know, and obviously there are issues with adult care at the moment, so I just think that I'm very bemused by that. So are we going to set targets we are going to hit, or are we going to set targets we are deliberately not going to hit?
In terms of the setting of the target, we actually set a target with a tolerance range, the tolerance being agreed between the portfolio holder and the executive director. I think the benefit of a tolerance is by saying to have an exact target on most metrics is incredibly challenging, but actually when would we be concerned if a target with a tolerance wasn't achieved? So it gives you that room either side of a target, and that's why we set a tolerance either side, and that's why we're still within that range, if you like. So it sets a range rather than a very specific number, and that's what we've done here.
So what is the tolerance of these now flexible targets?
Yep, so the target itself...
No, in general terms, is it 10%, 5%?
It's every single measure is agreed separately. It's done based on what would that look like reasonably. Sometimes tolerances are set because if you know, it could be individuals, so you can't have half a person, you know, if you set a certain tolerance. It's all done on a very individual key performance indicator basis in discussion, looking at all of the data.
Okay, thank you. Lack of vigour is probably my comment. I move to PI 42, percentage of adults receiving long-term support who have been, for 12 months, who have been reviewed in the last 12 months. Well, again, there is a drop in performance there, quite a big drop in performance. We're now gone down from 85 to 65%. Again, making sure people are getting their right level of care and safe level of care, this is a concern. Again, another target which is on a downward trend. So again, could I have an explanation of what's happening there and what's being done about it?
So two elements there. I think the first point to make is that the issue of tolerances, that's the way that we've worked performance management for some years now. That's not a new thing. We've done that as long as I've been in the council, I think as long as a number of people have been in the council. So that issue of tolerances, that's a very long-standing arrangement.
Sorry, I don't remember ever any officer telling me, oh, don't worry, we haven't hit the target, it's flexible. I might be wrong, but fellow ex-executive members, I have never had that. I understand that if you just narrowly miss a target, that's different to a trend. But anyway, back to the trend going down and the drop in performance.
I think I'd simply refer back to the conversation we had previously about reviews. This is one element of that. People should be reviewed on an annual basis. I have a risk-assured process so that people who need an urgent review are reviewed. Therefore, the people who are not being reviewed are people where the carers who see them every single day are not expressing any concern, are not suggesting there is any need or any change in their situation. So we would simply be doing a review just to check that everything was okay. And in those situations, the vast majority of those reviews lead to no change in the care package. So I'm simply making sure that we are using the available staffing resource for greatest effect. On the basis of the risk assurance process I've got, I don't have concerns that people who need a review are not getting it. Clearly, we should review people. We shouldn't leave them for years and years. But in this instance, I'm absolutely certain there is no harm and no risk to individuals from not having the review.
Do I come back again? So are we saying that they should be seen every 2 years? And as we know, the one person, if somebody is being abused by their carer, the one person they daren't say anything to is the person. I'm not saying it happens in Lincolnshire, I'm just saying in terms of assurance that safeguarding is being upheld, the one person, and there have been cases, as we know, the one person that the person who's being cared for daren't say anything to is the carer who is perhaps not doing their job properly, because obviously they rely on them every single day, several times a day maybe, to do. So again, are you saying then that a 65% hit rate is fine? Is there no sort of, we must make sure we see those every other year? It all sounds a bit less than, not quite right.
Again, I'm absolutely confident that the risk assurance process we have is robust. I would draw a sharp distinction between the review of someone's care package and issues about safeguarding, that we are in contact with people. People have their family and their friends around them, so there is an entirely separate process for bringing forward safeguarding issues. The review process is not dependent on that. So I don't think that someone's care assessment being a bit delayed is going to make any difference to their safeguarding. I have an entirely separate, very rigorous process for that. Clearly, I don't want to be leaving people for years and years not having a review, but as I say, the people who are waiting longer are the people who are in the lowest level of risk, and are people who, the vast majority of those individuals, there will be no change to their care package. So clearly, I wouldn't want it to go much below where it is now. But as I said earlier, I'm focusing my resource on the key areas of risk and on prevention, so that we deal with this pressure, not by putting more staff into doing reviews, but by reducing the number of reviews that need to be undertaken. There are fewer people in the care system.
Thank you.
I've got some other questions on other matters, if that's all right.
You can, yes, Councillor Hill. Go ahead.
Children's, there's a big jump in children in care. Do we know why that is? Has the assessment process changed? And do you anticipate that trend carrying on?
Yeah, so I don't anticipate that particular trend continuing. I think we have seen that's really levelled off, and actually with some planned SGOs, I think we're going to see that continue to level off, if not dip a little bit. I think what we saw was a slowing of exiting from care, and we've started to see that pick up again. I don't think that's going to make the difference to cost, though. I don't think in this case it's the placement mix rather than the numbers. But no, I don't see that jump continuing. I see that levelling off.
Thank you. I've also got one on fire, whether we can answer it. I mean, it's the number of fire incidents. I think just a comment, some of these PIs would be helpful if we had actual numbers to them. So obviously you've got the percentage is a bit below target, but how many dwelling fires do we have a year? And obviously I don't think there's a huge number, I might be wrong, but whether we could have a figure as to the target is what it is, and that equates to how many fires not attended, house fires not attended. So do we know what those are off the top?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that information. It's certainly information we can provide outside this report, and if it's helpful, we can provide an indicator of what that national trend looks like as well. There's certainly no fires that we're not attending.
Is there how many hundreds of dwelling fires are there annually in Lincolnshire? I don't think there's a huge number.
It sits around about 140.
And it was mentioned about volunteers, and also in the packet says about parish plans. Obviously we discussed this before, and I just wonder what else could be done to actually improve this. trying to work with volunteers, of course.
Andrew?
Thank you. Certainly with the contract we have with the voluntary community sector, can target that towards the commission arrangements with that. We've also got the councillor grant scheme, which can support some of those developments too. So we'll take that away and look at it. We're working collectively with children's and adult services, so that we're looking around volunteering in the whole across the council.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks, did you say you had some extra questions?
I've got some more
Thanks.
questions. I just, if I may, since Councillor Hill's raised fire, forgive me for sort of saying so, but at my parish council just recently, they wanted to express thanks to Lincolnshire Fire Service for the summer. That they've just had clearly a difficult summer, and in my area particularly, they thank the local volunteer fire brigade. But so I would just sort of record that if I may. I think the questions, and you've kind of caught me on the hop. I think I'll can I come in a bit later on recycling, if I may.
Is that in this item of the agenda, or is that a different part? So is it on this item of the agenda, or is it a different part?
Oh, it's on this.
It's on this
item,
one, yeah. Because I think.
I can't remember what my question was.
Okay, no,
To be honest,
I'll see if there's anybody else whilst you're looking. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Mine there's three different areas of questions I'd like to ask, because Councillor Hill has been able to go on with several different questions here, and I'd like to as well. First of all, I'd like to go back to the direct payments system being duplicated in several areas. You're saying, how long has that been going on? And why wasn't it identified before now? Because a lot of money has been wasted there. And when will we be on top of it, please?
So in terms of direct payments, I think that there's been a national push for many years to say that direct payments are a good thing. And in many cases, they are a really, really good thing. They can make a tremendous difference to someone's life. And so I think within Lincolnshire County Council, we've had a particular push to say, well, let's get as many people onto direct payments as we can, and that generally, let's work on a basis that it's better to get someone on a direct payment, and we'll get the numbers up, because generally they're a good thing. So I think that's been going on for a number of years, of a real focus on let's just have more direct payments. And I think it's really only in the last couple of years that we've taken a step back and said, okay, well, we've got a very high proportion of people on direct payments. Let's just check that they're the right people. And so we've had a number of instances where it's just been clear that actually, yes, the person has a direct payment, but they're not actually able to get any benefit from it at all. And if anything, actually being the employer, being the person that needs to manage that budget is in fact a burden on them, or alternatively, we're having to pay for a third-party company to provide that service that the council is perfectly capable of providing, because if the individual doesn't have capacity, then they can't manage the money themselves. So I think it's been I absolutely wouldn't want to say that there's been a flaw or a weakness in the way that we've been doing direct payments. I think it's one of those things where almost inevitably there's a bit of a sort of swing of the pendulum that you have to say, well, let's have a real push on direct payments because they're a really good thing, and you have a real push and you get a long way, and that does a lot of good, and then you need to check on that and push the pendulum back a little bit. And the key challenge will be to make sure that we don't push it too far back. We need to get the right level. So my principal social worker is leading the work on this. We've made significant progress over the last 6 months or so. I would hope that we would be pretty much there by the end of the financial year, there or thereabouts.
Thank you. May I come back with another question?
You may,
please,
Councillor
Chair?
Collier.
Thank you. This is referring to children looked after in local care authority. I have asked this question before, but I'd like to know again. We have 72 unaccompanied asylum seekers, which we have to take in our county, I understand. How are we assessing their ages, please, before they're going into care, foster care in particular?
Thank you, Councillor Collier. So, Heather.
Thank you, and I might bring Jo in on this in a moment. So there is a nationally recognised way in which those assessments are done, and there is a standard by which we have to do those assessments. But for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who come through the transfer scheme, which for Lincolnshire is the vast majority of them, those assessments are often done in other counties. They're done at the place at which they arrive. And then when they come to us, we will do other checks as well. We'll look at any papers and documentation that we've got. But there is a process that is nationally agreed and a standard which we have to meet as we do those assessments. I don't know, Jo, have you got any detail you can add to that?
Only just to say that we have a small and dedicated specific team that work with that group of young people. So the consistency and quality of those assessments are really good. And as Heather says, there's a process for which they need to follow, and there's regional and national groups that we can tap into for advice and guidance, but the standard is really good and clear about those assessments.
Thank you, because I think we've all heard of horror stories where they've said they're under 18 and they've quite clearly not been. Just wanted reassurance we're not having that happen here in Lincolnshire. Thank you. And may I come back with another question then, please, Chair?
One more, Brenda.
Thank you, that's fine. Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
come back to you if you've got any more after that. Thanks.
No, that's fine, thank you. I'm only doing what Councillor Hill managed to do there nicely. I want to go then to the adult care overspend, please. Lincolnshire County Council is the fastest growing part of Lincolnshire. We have the fastest growing age population. Nearly 24.6% of people in Lincolnshire are over 65 or over, higher than the national average, projected to grow by 41% by 2040s. Have we underestimated this in the figures, because we seem to be overspending in this area? Are we underestimating this for the future, please? We do need to look further into the future, because our aged population is growing. I'm growing by the minute.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Martin.
Is that a question that we'd be better off picking up under the next item about the financial performance? I'm very happy to give an answer, but I just wonder whether it will fit better with the financial performance report rather than
I'm happy with that, thank you.
We'll revisit that in the next section. Have we got any more questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Corey.
Yes, I devised this one because I was helping out my colleague, and he said he needed to buy some time. So, but picking up on his fault. Picking up on Caroline's narrative, thank you, about the Ready for Anything emergency volunteers, and you said, and I referenced page 78, that a training session didn't achieve, what was not achieved, a further training session wasn't achieved due to poor attendance, and that training sessions are being advertised wider to encourage participation. This might be a Ryan question, but can someone tell me what we're doing to encourage participation? And was that an expected non-attendance, or was it just people not confirming that they were going to go, so it was cancelled?
If I'm honest, I don't have the information for that, but I can come back to you outside of this meeting.
Thank you. Maybe that it goes to the Scrutiny Committee, if that's possible, Democratic Services colleagues. It might be nice to delve into that a little bit further, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Are you ready, Councillor Dilks?
I'm ready, sir, yeah. Okay. I do apologise. You caught me out, and my mind was still on the first chapter that we were looking at. It is on PI 37 and 38, recycling rates. First of all, on general recycling rates, it obviously mentions the food waste coming in 4 of the district councils. I'm not sure when the others are going to come in. Perhaps you might comment on that. But and it says that those are making a positive impact on recycling rates. I accept that. That's what we expected to happen, of course. But the target that we're not meeting is based on before the food waste came in. So, will the target be reviewed once we've got all 7 on board doing doing what they should be doing. That's the first question. And secondly, I'll just deal with it. Recycling at our own household recycling centres, not meeting the target of recycling. I welcome some of the initiatives that have gone on there. I noticed the paint. I was at mine recently and people were helping themselves to paint, which is really good, rather than chucking it in the land. We did have a trial some time ago of, and I noticed, I was at my Bourne site the other day, and of course, when you go in, quite rightly, you've got the big sign saying nothing may be taken away from this site. Doesn't mention that you can have the paint, but there we are. But we did have a trial some time ago, I think, of recycling some of the stuff that people put in that was of value. I think it was with charities or perhaps, and I just wondered where that is, please, which will help us, meet the real target. Sorry, thank you.
Councillor Dilks.
Andy.
Okay.
Andy.
So, as you point out, Councillor Dilks, the food recycling has made a difference, and the 3 additional districts, residents in those 3 districts should now all have their food caddies, and they all go online at different stages over the autumn, so it's been staggered in over the autumn. So we will expect to see a further improvement in that rate as that actually flows through. I think another significant issue is obviously South Holland have now confirmed they're going to introduce bin collections rather than bag collections. And again, in the context then of the segregation of that waste, that will undoubtedly have an impact on the recycling rates and the quality of the waste that is provided in that district as well. So they're both positive developments. And again, it's a reflection on the ongoing work that's taken place through the Waste Partnership across Lincolnshire, where we as the disposal authority work collectively with the 7 collection authorities to keep moving forward in that way. I think it would be perfectly reasonable at some point in the future that we review that recycling rate on the context of performance. I'm hopeful that with all those other changes, it will all continue to go in the right direction. In terms of the recycling at the household waste recycling centres, of course, we're dependent on what people bring. So in the context of that, there's a limit to what we can do directly other than continue to educate people about what they can bring to the sites and such like. The reuse facility that I think you referred to was trialled at Tattershall, and that's gone well. We're now developing a programme to roll them out to all of the sites. Things like the paint reuse are part and parcel of targeting particular activities, and there's now more work being done at actually seeing whether there's a similar proposal that could be worked up in respect of timber. Dare I say, there's lots of people that maybe do DIY projects and don't use all the timber that they use, but actually there's enough of quality of that to actually be brought back and reused in the same sort of way. So we continue to look at innovation in the context of how stuff can be brought to the sites. If it does have a further value, how that can be recycled or reused in a positive way for the community.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Dilks. Councillor Hill, I think you...
Do you want to check with Councillor Collier if it's all right if I come back? Is that okay? Just place, I've got a couple of questions on place. First of all, the Section 19's completed, a bit below target, but I suppose the follow-up questions, is there going to be a target of these issues being resolved? Because identifying the issue is only part of it. And the second isn't really a question, it's about the contracts and performance of highways, which on the face of these figures is good, it's okay. And I did go back and look at the more detailed in the Scrutiny Committee, in the Transport Scrutiny Committee, to look at it. And all I'm saying really, I just want to put on record, I have concerns now about the performance of the gullying teams, the contractors. Like many members, I have a big rural area, so I'm not talking about one incident, I'm talking about a pattern where gullies are reported blocked, months and months go by. In fact, the leader reported one back in December in my patch when there's an election. That's still not blocked, and we still don't seem to be able to get the contractors to come and clean these out. So I'm just putting on record, I believe, and I have mentioned this to Councillor East, I believe there's an issue with that particular contract, and I don't want an answer today, but just flagging it, that I do think there is some issues about how it's working. When you look at the delivery. It says it's all right, but I just think from my own experience in several parts of my patch, it isn't. But the other question is, and the actual question is about the section 19. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, concerned to hear your concerns about the gully cleaning. If there's more information you want to provide to me, I can look into that further and then sort of bring back further information either through to you individually or through the H&T Scrutiny Committee, if that's appropriate. So I'll take that away.
I mean, I have done the area manager, so I'll pass them on to you.
That's fine. In terms of the issues regarding Section 19 investigations, you're aware, Councillor Hill, obviously the complexity of a lot of those matters makes it difficult to be precise about particularly timescales revolving around actually the resolving of those issues. I think it's therefore setting a target potentially could create hostage to fortune. What we do, though, of course, is through the Environment Scrutiny Committee bring updates in the context of partner performance, in respect of the improvements that we're making, the activities that are taking, and then individual schemes that are brought forward to resolve some of those Section 19 matters are brought into that scrutiny committee. We can take it away and look again at whether there is a meaningful target to set in terms of the resolution of matters, but all I would say is that we're on top of that, we're following that through, we're monitoring it and reporting it obviously through the exec councillor, so there's an awareness and understanding of the progress that we're making. And we try obviously to keep the people directly affected communicated on the progress that we're actually making. Other councillors are aware of other programmes of activity, particularly the groundwater programme that we've been delivering over the last 18 months or so. Again, other endeavours that are actually designed to avoid people even suffering those flooding incidences in the first place. So proactive activity is part and parcel of our overall strategy as well.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Davis, did you put your hand up earlier on or not? You were just scratching. Well, you just bought 2 cows, so thanks very much. Have we got any other questions? Okay. Thanks for your questions and comments. This will now conclude the discussion of this item. A summary of our comments as captured by the Senior Scrutiny Officer will be shared with the Executive for its consideration. I propose that the Board has received and scrutinised the report to the Executive. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. That is agreed. On to item 8. Review of Financial Performance 2026-27 Quarter 1. This report can be found on pages 107 to 158 of the agenda pack and is for pre-decision scrutiny. The Board has been consulted on the review of the financial performance for 26-27 Quarter 1. The report is due for consideration by the Executive at its meeting on the 1st of September 2026. All comments from the Board will be reported to the Executive prior to decision. The actions required by the Board are to review and scrutinise the attached report to the Executive. The report will be presented by Pam Clipson, Head of Financial Services. Over to you, Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. This report represents Council's Quarter 1 financial monitoring position for 26-27 and provides an early assessment of the Council's financial performance, risks and opportunities for the remainder of the financial year. As at the 30th of June, you can see the Council is forecasting a broadly balanced position on the Council funds with a forecast underspend of just short of 100,000. That position is shown on the revenue table, highlights a material increase, particularly in our demand-led services, pressures which are being offset by our contingency funding and favourable variances elsewhere within the council budgets. The Quarter 1 forecast should be viewed as an early indication of that emerging financial risk. The demand-led pressures, particularly within our children's services and homeschool transport, are relative of national trends that we're seeing within children's social care and SEND-related demand. Having said that, we are reviewing the forecast as we look to Quarter 2, to stress test the assumptions underpinning those demand-led forecasts in particular. The report also provides updates on the capital programme. You will note in the report we have highlighted the need to adjust some of our budgets for recently confirmed grant allocations, particularly within the Children's Services programme. The forecast position already assumes the higher level of spend, and therefore the confirmed grants will ensure delivery within the funding allocation, reporting what you can see at the moment as a financial pressure. The report also includes our reserves position, budget transfers and treasury management activity. Together, these elements provide an assurance regarding the Council's overall financial resilience, while also highlighting the financial challenges that we will need to consider as we move through 26-27 and review our future financial planning, including the budget setting for 27-28 as we move into the second half of the year. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pam. Do we have any questions? Councillor Hill.
Well, I think this is quite a worrying report, Chairman. This is the first quarter's performance, and already there are over £12 million worth of service in terms of the services. There is nearly £12 million of overspend, and they are being bailed out from other areas. So, for example, children's is now £9 million, projected to be £9 million overspent, despite the fact that a lot of extra money was put into that particular service in the budget. Place 3 million, resources 1.5 million, which is a big concern. So I suppose, and the even more worrying thing is contingency has already been raided. Many years in the past we never used contingency much, but it's nearly been hollowed out. There's a little bit left, and I suppose there is a concern if something untoward comes on during the rest of the year, the majority of the year, what's going to happen if contingency is exhausted? So I suppose the first question really is, in particular in children's, is your budget under control, or is it just we'll spend and spend?
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. So, as you know, it's a demand-led budget, and I think that demand has been incredibly challenging, and I think the placement mix has been incredibly challenging as well. I think it is a serious position. I acknowledge that, and I think that we saw factors that were really present from February onwards after we'd agreed the budget. We already started to see that increase, and we saw an overspend in residential placements at the end of last year of around 8 million. So even before we'd entered the budget period, we were starting to see those pressures. So I think, is it under control? It's well understood, it's well known. We are continuing to protect children. We're continuing to bring children into care when we need to do that. The choices we have around placements are more limited than they used to be. We don't have the capacity, because of the volume, to place in the placement mix that we used to be able to place into. So what we're having to do is to ensure that we are continuing to recruit more foster carers, continuing to work with the IFAs, as I said on the previous report, around performance. But I do recognise that this is placing significant pressure on the council. We have delivered the savings target that we were allocated, which was a significant savings target. And actually, we have done some really good work around the transformation, which has just been overtaken by the demand. We continue to benchmark well, so we do continue. And I know that is cold comfort, but it is important that we keep looking at the benchmarking as well. We continue to bring less children into care and to pay less per child in care. But that it is a challenge for us. The position of the children's services markets are really, really challenging. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is some of the poor performing authorities who've had really high numbers of children in care, and you'll be familiar with some of them. They are starting to get that under control now. And we are starting to see areas within the East Midlands who had really high numbers of children in care start to get that under control, and that will start to affect as well our benchmarking. But at this current point, we know it, we understand it, we're doing everything we can around it, so it has got all the grip that I think it's possible to have on it. But I recognise that it is presenting a pressure, and I also recognise that we could have asked for more at the point of setting the budget, but as you acknowledge, we did ask for a significant increase at that time as well.
If I could come back, I think your vast point is very valid. Well, so quickly to run into or projected overspends is a concern, and don't underestimate the challenge you've got. But I have to say we've had challenges in children's for years and years and years. And we've always, although the budget has increased, we've never been in a position where, you know, every year massive overspends, every year huge amounts of money put in, and yet still there is a concern. So I do hope that the Children's Scrutiny Committee will be looking at what else could be done to look at managing demand, I think is where we are. I mean, obviously I've got some issues on the workforce metrics, which I'll come back to on that paper. Can I just ask on paragraph 1.18, and there's two issues there. Obviously on the capital, there's objected overspend, but obviously that is predicated on this money coming from government, isn't it? So that overspend will disappear. But then we go to place, it seems to be treated differently, because they're saying there's an underspend, but then there will be the highway, the transport block, the integrated transport block will be given. So it's not a question for it's a question for resources really. So we seem to have got two different areas where money which will be coming in is being accounted for differently. So how come one is being called an overspend and one's being called an underspend?
Thank you, Councillor Hill.
So we do have two different positions, but Andy's got the detail behind the place area. So do you want to pick that up then?
Yeah, so in terms of the position for the integrated transport block, that's effectively, at this point in time, we haven't drawn down that money to allocate it to particular schemes. So that money will be drawn down to actually relate to particular schemes, and therefore over the year that will probably balance out in the context of those schemes that have already been approved. One of them potentially is sort of the safety works that are being programmed for Metheringham Crossroads. So it's a scheme that's in the system, and therefore that will balance that out over the year.
So the money has been allocated from government?
So the allocation in the integrated transport block is the funding that is in our control.
We've got, so that's the difference then.
Yeah.
So one is money received but not allocated,
yes. Yeah.
and one is anticipating money not received. Obviously, again, we've got the issue of homeschool transport, which again seems to be struggling to stay under control. This is on the fact that you know, pupil numbers are stabilising, in fact will soon decline. So what's happening there? And I know a lot of work's being done, but again, we don't seem to be able to get this under control.
So similar to Heather's points earlier in respect of the wider children's services situation, we're aware of the issues, we are monitoring them closely, we recognise the risks associated with it. There are two main contributory factors to the increased forecast overspend at this moment in time. Inflationary pressures regarding transport costs, predominantly relating to fuel. So when the budget was set, that was set at a 3%, an expectation of a 3% inflation rate. The June announcement from ONS now brings that in at 6.8%. So that, when you actually translate that into a £60 million budget, effectively that results in a figure of about 1.8 million. So as we're reviewing our contracts and we go through a process, as you're aware, of making sure we're reviewing contracts in a timely fashion rather than them letting run for a period of time, those contracts are renewed with additional costs because the operators are experiencing those costs at the fuel pumps. And then the second main element is in the context, again, of the nature of the SEND agenda and the impacts of the type of clients that we're having to move around. Whilst we've got less contracts, or more contracts have been offered up than have been renewed, the complexity of the individual cases is requiring an increased demand in the context of the type of transport that's being provided. So those two things together, in the context of the demand-led elements and the inflationary pressures, are giving rise to that sort of overall position at this moment in time.
So appreciate your issues, and they will, you know, you'll have a problem. And if the contingency is used up, will you then be expected to find the savings from within your own directorate, for example, on highways maintenance or something like that?
So at this moment in time, we are still continuing with the efficiency programs that were identified through the previous transformation work. Over £500,000 worth of those savings have been identified and have worked into as well. So that work will continue. We continue to look at whether there are good practices elsewhere to actually sort of learn lessons from other authorities. But potentially, yes, there will be a need to ultimately balance the directorate budget and make difficult choices as the year progresses.
So is your anticipation that you will be asked to manage it within your directorate? In other words, find savings, or will I don't know what's been asked corporately, because this is a worry, because, I mean, we've already got issues of the things like the travel. You know, there's a big cost in the 45 pence a mile for staff. There's some big pressures coming up, so I'll be interested to know, what is the plan? Is it to expect directorates to find it within their budgets and find cuts in their budgets, or is it going to be a recommendation to full council? I'd be interested to know what the plan is. Do you know what the plan is?
So, I'm happy for you.
So given it's an issue across the whole council and not just Andy's area, it's probably helpful if I can... Absolutely. So recognising this is a challenging position in Q1, as Pam said, we've already got a number of actions we've talked to the corporate leadership team about. People tend to be a bit cautious in Q1 with their forecast, so going back and looking at the figure and really doing that due diligence around the forecast to make sure we have got an accurate position. There will be other areas where we can go to, making sure that we're drawing down all the reserves that we've planned to draw down for things like grants and contributions, looking at where we can, if we've got areas where we can slow some of the spend down, like filling vacancies and things like that. So we've had a discussion at the corporate leadership team. We'll bring back a number of options and we'll review all of that. There isn't expectations for directors to manage their budgets, but it's clearly an issue across all of our services. So we'll look at it as a collective and come back and consider that for Q2.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm concerned about the transport as well, because obviously petrol's going to keep going up, so the costs are going to go up, but I'm sure Andy and the team have got the finger on the pulse. Mine's regarding the children's services. I have said before, this will continue to rise, as I think it will do. It'll be quite turbulent over the next couple of years, I have to say. So hopefully we're going to get some more money for children somehow to keep on top of it. Would you say it's more of a national trend that all children's services are struggling? Because I'm assuming they are. So it's not just a Lincolnshire County Council issue, it's a whole national issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Did you want me to come back on that?
You can.
Yeah, so I think there are definitely a lot of national aspects within that. I think the care market is something that is going to receive national intervention, has received some, and will need to continue to do that. But I think the other thing to add in is where we've got really complex children, those costs can be really extortionate. So the highest cost children in care are costing us a significant proportion of that overspend. Some children in care cost us up to £18,000 a week. And I'm not sure that that's well known. I know obviously Councillor Hill will know that, but actually what we're seeing is, as we see a rise in those, either children who are remanded or children who, because of their mental health needs, need really highly complex packages. And they've always been hard to predict, and we've always been able to, as you say, draw on contingency where we've had children who've unexpectedly cost us a lot of money. But I think that we are seeing an increase in those children and seeing an increase in children who require highly complex packages. And I think it's a really hard thing for us to say, well, how many of those will we get? Because that would vary the budget by millions. And I think that's something that I need to reflect on in terms of when I do the projections, and maybe as a council we need to project on, do we want to project for kind of middle worst case scenarios? Do we want to say let's put some contingency aside specifically for that, because that is becoming our challenge in children's services. We don't have the option to say no. And we negotiate really well on the costs, but some of those really high cost children, and that's definitely a national problem, the high cost children in care across the country is really becoming a national driver and something we need to consider.
Thank you, Heather. Councillor Brooks, would you like to come back?
Thank you very much for that, Heather. I totally agree with you. I believe it all started from COVID and it's just got worse. I'm hoping that it's going to calm down slightly, but it is a national issue we've got. So the more money, we're going to have to put more money into children, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have a few questions, Mr. Chairman. Happy to do them at your discretion. Just to start with a kind of a headline figure, if I'm reading the papers correctly, we're looking at 12.595 overspend. most of which is offset, well, in fact, more than all of it is offset by some underspends and central government funding. I suppose my two questions on that is, are we seeing a 12.595 increase in the annual budget? Are we baking in those overspends? And how much of that offset, you know, government grants, underspends, can we forecast in for future years?
Fighting over the mic. Thank you, Councillor Davis. So we will be reviewing all of the figures that we're now seeing as part of the 27-28 budget setting that we start now for the as we approach the second half of the year. A lot of the forecasting that we're reviewing as part of Q2 will then inform whether we need to, using your language, bake that into the core demand. The budgets that we've got further on, they are the recurrent elements, and again we will factor in the recurrent nature through that budget setting process.
Just to pick up what you said about the funding side, Councillor Davies. So you'll recall when we set the budget this year, we did get some growth in our funding from central government around fair funding. That will look to recognising that we've been underfunded in the past. So that element of that funding will get a larger percentage of that for 27, 28 and 28, 29. So there is an element of growth in our funding from government, recognising that we'd not been funded fairly previously, so which will contribute towards the growth in the pressures.
Just off the back of that, Mr. Chairman, it might be useful if you could clarify what that increase is per year, roughly, in funding?
I'm not sure if I could off the top of my head, but it was all in the budget papers in February.
But it's about at least £30 million a year, isn't it?
I think it grew up to 60 million over the 3-year period. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Would you like me to ask my next question, Mr. Chairman, or do you want to?
Just one more, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Quite concerned, as Councillor has alluded to, that the £6 million core contingency funding has almost been spent up. I guess the question is, what's the plan? You know, if that contingency has gone, almost by the end of Q1, where does that leave us? And with the greatest respect to what we heard about the conversation about, you know, planning and futures, you know, if next week something comes along that's a £500,000 problem in a service area, where does the money come from?
So we're going to go through the process that I've just talked about. Corporate leadership team are very committed to making sure we've all got collective ownership and looking at all our spend and areas where we can be updating those forecasts and drawing down the reserves that we plan to. Ultimately, we do have reserves that we can draw down if there are unexpected costs coming in, so things like the general reserve and earmark reserves are there for those purposes. We'd not planned to do that, but that is the ultimate backstop. But we've got an awful lot that we can do before we get to that position. Can I just add, Chair, for transparency for everybody, the contingency would be offset anyway. So whether it was allocated or not, in the bottom line, it would have been, you know, it's not a pot of money that we've pulled in addition to the budget. It would have been, there wouldn't, if we were overspent to the level we're overspent, then that contingency is already included in the bottom line. It's not additional money. It's just where it's allocated. So I do understand what you're saying in terms of would it have been there to be drawn from, but with the overspend figures as they are, then it's not new money that we've spent. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of a service contingency fund, isn't it? To provide some headroom, which I have to say, it is concerning, and this is a comment rather than the question, that we are using the contingency for kind of discretionary funding. That seems an unusual approach. But I've got more questions, but at your discretion.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I'll come back to you. Heather, just for clarity, am I right in believing that we're getting 90% funded by the government on the overspend? How does that affect us regarding the figures, and is that in the figures? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's just for the high needs block. So the high needs block won't, we don't present that as being funded because that's not how it works financially. But for the send high needs block, the government is removing 90% of that overspend.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to go back to the send hubs and what a fantastic idea that is. and we're gradually implementing these and getting more in place. I'd like to know when is it going to be anticipated that we'll be able to show a saving on the transport with that, please?
Thank you. Heather, looks like you've been left with that one.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Collier. So I think one of the things that we've always said as a council is that we wouldn't move children without parental consent. So what we don't do is take a child who's perhaps costing us a lot of money in placement A and put them into that new placement unless the parents want that. We don't move because sometimes those SEND children have taken a long time to get settled and are settled in that placement. So that was the commitment of the council to parents in Lincolnshire, that nobody would be forced to move. So what you'll see is some of those higher costs will grow out the budget, and then you won't see the new costs coming in. But a bit like we're talking about with the children in care numbers and demand, the problem is there's still more demand in the system. So I think that we're already seeing children placed closer to home with lower cost transport, but we're also seeing more SEND children and more demand. So I don't think that we didn't open the SEND hubs to make a saving. That will be a byproduct of it. It's about getting that real good quality close to home. And what you can see through the work that we're doing is that we're starting to see more and more children with SEND placed in local mainstream hubs, and that's, as you say, something that we should be really proud of.
Thank you very much, because that's so important that children are able, if possible, to go to their local area school. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Collier. Councillor Hill, did you have any more questions, or had you?
Yeah, I have a couple actually. One is the locums in legal services, big overspend. So, what are you doing? What are we doing about that? Is a regionalisation an answer, or what? And I have another question. I'll hold that for the moment, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly, thank you. We recognise the spend in locums. It's been a constant for the last couple of years now. So we're undertaking a whole review of our legal services approach. One of the issues is around inability and restrictions on being able to recruit to these roles. So we're not competitive in the labour market in that area. So reviewing our job descriptions and our approach to attract solicitors into the legal services team earlier on, as well as being able to attract them from other agencies and compete with neighbouring authorities in the private sector. Being able to have more of our own, reduce the vacancies will reduce the reliance on the locum and reduce the overall spend.
Thank you, Andrew.
I mean, good luck with the private sector, because obviously the lawyers in the private sector earn a lot more than we can do because of the way we are, our bands of pay. So I think that's probably where you need to be looking. The second question is about the 300,000 taken from contingency for the cycle event, which is happening this weekend. Is that the total cost of the hosting the cycle event?
The current budget forecast is that we are going to deliver the hosting of that event on stage 1 within that budget envelope as per the decision that was originally made.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Chairman. The projected use of the 6 million core contingency fund has already been mentioned. That 5 million, over 5 million of it is virtually committed or forecast to be committed in the year. But that is an area of concern so early in the year, of course, as has been alluded to. But I move on to page 116, where we're on the reserves commentary, and I'm just slightly alarmed, quite a bit alarmed, that we're relying on spending well over half of the reserves in 1 year, in the current year. We're going to be spending over 80 million of the reserves this year, of the 137 total reserves balance, and it's going to be cut to 58.4 million, it says, but when you look at the table, there'll then be further cuts in each of the forthcoming 3 or 4 years. Is that an area of concern?
So the reserves are split into two. There are planned use of reserves that are specific areas. So we will plan to use those reserves for the purpose as the time comes per year. So for me, where we've got a plan and the reserves are in place, we will spend to those. Back to either mine or Michelle's comments earlier, as part of our work for Q2, we are doing a full review of the reserves. In addition to that, you will see there is the DSG reserve within there and how that operates, and that unplanned reserve there. That's how the DSG deficit operates, and that will be linked to that 90%, 10% government funding. So to summarise, where we have a reserve plan in place over multiple years, we are spending to those plans. However, we will be reviewing all of the reserves for Q2, but one of the largest areas of that reserve that you'll see is the use of the DSG, and that will then link into the 90%, 10% and how that all feeds in as part of our national position on DSG reserves.
Yeah, thanks for that. But we are still starting the year with 137 million in reserves, and the forecast is that we end the year with 58, which is, using, if I might call it that, using over half the reserve in a year. So at the end of the year, we'll be we're not going to have so much money in reserves, are we?
That is the forecast, but if we get reserves for particular things, so where we've carried forward money into an earmarked reserve, we will spend it aligned to the reason we received that money in and put it into the reserves. So where we have received that money to spend on a particular thing, we will spend it on it. So that is the reflection of that spend. It is not unplanned spend on it.
I don't know if it helps if I just come in about the DSG, because we've obviously we've talked about that a little bit, haven't we, at this meeting. So that figure that you're talking about, Councillor Dilks, is very much offset by the use and the position of the DSG reserve, which is in a negative balance. So, and that's been the accounting requirement that we've been asked to put into place for the last few years by the government. They've basically asked us to park the deficit on the DSG and kind of ignore it, if you like. But obviously it looks quite disturbing when you see it on these tables. So the solution that the government have come to is that we no longer, after this year and last year, ignore this balance, which is obviously we're still using our cash, and they will reimburse us with 90% of that deficit, but we then still do have to plan to meet the 10% deficit, and it will come into our accounts like you would normally see with any other reserve. But it does make it look disturbing, I get that, Councillor Dilks, because that deficit on the DSG is offsetting all of our other reserves.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. My colleagues understand much more, and they've asked some very pertinent questions, and with increasing alarm and concern. And I know that you're going to be running a review, as you've just said, on reserves. At what point, forgive the question, does this authority not have the reserves to be able to deliver its services? Because it seems to be a direction of travel, and I'm hearing concern from this side of the chamber that our financial commitments are growing and our ability to meet those financial commitments aren't. So could you answer that question for me?
I can have a go at that. So the reserves is only something we'd look at for the in-year position. So we're obviously forecasting £12 million worth of pressures on the services. We've got budgets that can offset that. So, but it's a big commitment. So that's why we're looking at everything and every possible opportunity. So we don't have to get to a position where we're impacting on any service delivery, because that's not what we want. When we come into future years, clearly this position will feed into any pressures that we put forward to meet the budget that gets set for 27-28. But also you've got I've mentioned fair funding growth that will come into their savings that were already planned. So need to consider it in the round and what that means for your overall position. When we looked at the MTFP for future years, when we set the budget in February, we thought we would have some surplus. Clearly, the pressures that are coming through will probably look at a more balanced position for that. But the pressures are growing, but the funding's growing from government as well. So we need to look at that aside each other. we've still got financial volatility reserve just under 47 million that we've not needed to touch. We've got general fund reserve of 25 million that we've not needed to touch. So we're not running out of money, if that's the concern. But clearly we need to do everything we can to make sure we're managing our finances as well as we can to make sure we're not impacting on service delivery.
Thank you, Michelle. I have down here Councillor Hill and Councillor Davis for extra questions. Are you okay? One more, Councillor Davis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's pertinent we're discussing this at the moment as you begin the budget setting process for next year. I think one thing is clear, particularly around the children's services budget, when you look at the numbers, so kind of October last year, 67 independent residential placements, has gone up now to 97. I think that's putting nearly £12 million worth of cost pressure in. What I'm hearing, candidly, is that the budget you went into bat for in February was a wing and a prayer, and you really knew the money was, you needed more money, but for political reasons, you didn't ask for it. Now, with respect to Michelle and talk of reserves, the direction of travel is clear. If you keep spending more money than you're bringing in, the council will run out of money. So it isn't true to say that, you know, we're not going to run out of money. On this forward projection, we do run out of money unless something fairly stark is done at a point in the future. Now, I'm not saying next year or the year after, but ostensibly we can do. So my question is, can we have, what was your understanding during the budget setting process, Heather, of what particularly the independent placement challenge was? Because that seems to be, you know, if the headline figures, that's the big pressure, isn't it? And, you know, what's it going to be in a year's time?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Davies. So I to be fair, I didn't go in on a wing and a prayer, and I didn't feel I couldn't ask. I just want to be really, really clear about that. Did I get this projection in the right place? No, we did really detailed work, and as we do every year, we assumed growth in different areas, but what I got wrong was the placement mix. So I had not projected for as great a reliance on residential as we've ended up with, and I hadn't projected for the high-end complexity that we've ended up with, and that's where both of those, so a swing of 1%, 2% in your placement mix, and a swing of 1 or 2 children in your complexity, hit your budget really hard, and I didn't project significantly enough for that. In the past, that's been the case as well. So we've overspent in our residential placements budget for the last 3 years, increasingly so. So 2 million in 23-24, 5 million in 24-25, nearly 9 million in 25-26. So you could say I haven't been doing that projection. You know, we haven't been, it's notoriously difficult to project on. And if you project worst case scenario, then you put the council under pressure unnecessarily. So we did a detailed analysis of the numbers of children down to children we knew were turning 18, down to children who we knew were at risk of coming into care and what the percentage conversion of those children into care had been for the last 3 years, and applying it to those children who we were working with in child protection. So I would want to assure you there was no wing and a prayer about it. I think that what we are currently going through now is looking really, really carefully again at that detail and looking at where we need to adjust for the placement mix and where we need to adjust for complexity and build that into the budget up front. And I do think that will create a pressure in terms of the budget planning. But just to be really clear, I didn't not put assumptions in there because I was asked not to politically, and I didn't do it in a wing and prayer. I would agree, a Q1 to have an overspend of this size, I didn't get it right, and we will go away and we'll look at that and we'll learn from that. And what's important to me is that I'm transparent about what we're saying. This is a projection, we'll do all we can, but as you know, these budgets don't tend to come down. But we will be doing all we can in year to mitigate this and acknowledge the pressure it's putting on the wider council. But it wasn't that we didn't do detailed working out, it wasn't that we didn't do detailed financial forecasting. And the forecasting is what it is forecasting, and that hasn't become the reality. And even by the time we got to the first day of this budget, February and April had already put pressure on that budget.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, Councillor Davis.
Just very brief, I appreciate and accept everything you say there, but this is a £12 million variance. Now, the Children's Scrutiny Committee may be a better place to look into this, but I think it may be worth us digging in, and I'd be keen to know what was your projection in terms of raw data versus actuals. And I completely accept it's difficult, but this is, we're not talking £1 or £2 million now. We're talking £12 million wrong, and I think that's something we can't sit back and just go, oh well, so be it.
I completely agree, and I'm happy to we would always take the budget through children's scrutiny anyway, and I'm sure that there will be other committees that want to have a look at that. Understand.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Collier.
More of a comment than a question. I really appreciate the work that Heather Sandy is doing with our children in our community and in our county. I know they work very hard, and I have full confidence in her and her team. I'd just like that stated. Noted.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Martin.
So Councillor Collier just asking that question has reminded me that she asked a question under the previous item, which I then dodged. I realised that I probably ought to own up to that now and answer the question that she asked under the previous item, if that's okay. So the question you asked, Councillor Collier, was essentially about older people and whether we are forecasting accurately in terms of the pressure of older people and the growth in the older persons population in Lincolnshire. I think what I would say is that we are one of the better performing authorities in the region in terms of older people. If you look at the proportion of the population over the age of 65 who are in residential care, we are almost exactly where you would expect us to be in comparison to our statistical neighbours. So if you're a Lincolnshire person over the age of 65, you are pretty much exactly likely to be in residential care here as you are in any other similar authority. If you are an older person over the age of 65 who needs care in the community, we actually have a rather lower proportion of that population in care in the community compared to our statistical neighbours. And I would put that down to our strength-based approach and our work around prevention, that essentially we are, the numbers I would say are evidence of our success in enabling people to continue to live the lives that they choose in the communities that they choose in their own homes. That obviously has a significant impact on the amount of money that the council spends and therefore on the budget. We're also proving very successful in terms of our the fee rates that we set. We are about average, slightly below average in the rate that we pay per hour of home care. We are quite a lot lower than other authorities in the amount that we pay per week of residential care. Given that residential care is the biggest single spend of any budget line across the whole of the council, being a bit under in residential care for older people is a very good place to be. And I should say that we are generally, in terms of the trajectories, the forecasts of how many older people we will have in the care system, actuals are turning out pretty much in line with those trajectories. We are seeing a bit of an overspend in three areas. Reablement, we're spending about £1.5 million more than we had expected to. I regard that as a good thing. Reablement is a really positive service. Something like 94% of the people who are discharged from hospital and then go through reablement have no ongoing need for care at all. And so in terms of the positive impact for the individual and the financial benefit for the council, that's a really, really good thing. So spending a little bit more money there seems to me a very good investment. The second area is around community equipment. Members will be aware that some months ago, NRS, one of the national providers of community equipment, collapsed as a company. They provided about a quarter of the market across the country as a whole. There were some one-off costs involved in that, and those are reflected in the spend for the year, but they were one-off costs, and we are not expecting those to continue. And then the third area is in short-term residential care, where again we're spending a bit more than the budget was, but again I would see that as a positive from a preventative approach. We are putting people on a short-term basis into residential care working with them to see if there is a better future for them, and in many cases then discharging them from that short-term residential care back into supported living or home care, so that we haven't said, oh, you're struggling at home, let's put you in for the rest of your life in a care home. We said, let's put you for a short term in a care home, we'll work with you, and then you can go home again. So those are three areas where we are overspending the budget lines, but actually I think we're doing it in a way which is beneficial for the people of Lincolnshire and ultimately will reduce the pressure on the older people's budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So a bit shocked. I heard rain then for a second. It's been a while. Councillor Collar, would you like to come back?
Yes, thank you very much, Martin, for that. I'd almost forgot myself there. Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on your community equipment. What are we talking about here, please?
From memory, I think it's about £300,000.
Yeah, more meant, what sort of equipment, please? Sorry, I should be more clear.
So community equipment would be a commode, a specialist bed, a walking frame, that kind of thing. It's equipment which is mobile, so not home adaptations. That's paid for through the Disabled Facilities Grant. This is bits of kit that people can put in their home, as say beds, walkers, commodes, alarms, that kind of thing.
Can I just ask from experience myself, I had my mum live with me for 14 and a half years, and so we had to have a lot of equipment for her. It was all just dumped at the end. Nobody wanted it. I know commodes, maybe, I don't know. What are we doing about recycling, handing them back? Because that seems to be a problem.
So there are two elements there. The first is that we will collect as much equipment as we possibly can. We don't want people to be left with equipment that they don't need. So we have a contract, a part of the contract with the new provider, Millbrook, is that they will collect equipment that's no longer required. They will then bring as much of it back into use as is possible for it to be brought back into use. However, we are often in a position where for a fair amount of kit it's actually more expensive to sterilise it than it is to buy a new piece of kit. And so to give an example, so some years ago when I was in the NHS, I was responsible for the wheelchair service for Birmingham. And we gave out an awful lot of simple push wheelchairs, so not electronic ones, they're a separate category, but ordinary push wheelchairs. For a wheelchair that's been used and then returned, you literally have to take it completely apart, every single item of it. Every single bit then has to be sterilised, replaced if necessary, and then put back together. That's actually more expensive than buying a brand new wheelchair that's come off the factory. And it sort of seems madness, but the cost of taking it apart as an individual item, cleaning each individual part, putting it back together again, you can see then that actually that compared to we've got a factory that is producing new wheelchairs. So in that instance, they were scrapped because that was actually better value for money.
Thank you, Martin. Do we have any other further questions? Councillor Corey.
I think this is probably a question for another committee, but interesting point. I know that this is detail and we're looking, really, this is a big strategic meeting, but who bears the external costs of that continually dumping kit like this? Because it's a really pertinent question. I would like another committee to look at this, and maybe health as well, that this is not free. This is not the cheap alternative. Someone else is bearing the cost of that, and it's usually the taxpayer somewhere else. So what is the ultimate cost of dealing with all these externalities? So quick answer, fine for the commissioning authority. Someone's picking up the cost of that. It's usually the environment and the taxpayer. Where's that cost borne and who pays it?
So to give a quick answer, normally there are charges for commercial waste. Those would be borne by the provider of the equipment, and that would therefore be added into the contract value. So ultimately, it would be part of the contract value that LCC would pay the provider, because the provider would be paying the waste authority for their commercial waste.
But there's there's something behind that. There's something hidden behind that as well. And so I think as a public authority, we really need to look into that. But thank you. But for another time, another place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Actually, on that note, would it not be worth looking at a system similar to the waste system, where you can have old wheelchairs, old appliances that people can pick up free of charge, rather than basically being wasted? And I know obviously they need cleaning, but I mean, people may take the risk and clean it themselves. You never know. Seems a lot of waste.
I suspect that my Director of Public Health would be jumping up and down on my head if I suggested that the equipment which had been used for clinical purposes and personal care could then be put back into the system without a thorough cleaning process. So I entirely get where you're coming from, but as I'm channeling my inner Director of Public Health and with her responsibilities for infection control, and I don't think we would be able to do that.
Thanks, Martin. Just a thought. Anyway, I propose that the board has reviewed and scrutinised the report to the executive. Can you please raise your hands if you all agree? Thank you. That is agreed. Now, we'll have a 10-minute break, because things are going on a little bit longer. I need to go and get my washing in. That's probably too late now. Because I'm not sure about anybody else, but I need to turn the bike round. So we'll have a short break, and we'll be back at Synchronised Watches at 5 to 12. If that's okay, thank you. I believe all officers are here that need to be here. That's fantastic. I think we have everybody. Fantastic. Right, we'll continue with the item number 9, Q1 workforce metrics. The scrutiny report can be found on pages 159 to 170 of the agenda pack. Provides an update on the 2026-2027 workforce metrics for Q1. The actions required by the board are to review and seek assurance on the performance of the council workforce metrics for 26-27 Q1 in comparison to available benchmarking information. The report will be presented by Tony Kavanagh, Chief People Officer. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Now I think we are just as the clock has turned. So just to give an overview of the paper that you've got in front of you, there are sort of a couple of positive things coming from this, and there's a couple of challenges within the report. If we start with the sort of the more positive angle, firstly, picking up staff turnover as an example, the council's turnover has been fairly stable now for a number of quarters, and reduced slightly to 7.81% on the previous quarter. And when you compare that to our local government national average of around 12%, you see that we're in a fairly positive position, albeit turnover is good in some instances as well. We don't want to be completely stagnating in terms of the churn of employees. So I think we've got a fairly healthy voluntary turnover rate. Again, sort of workforce size, again, you'll see that in terms of employments, headcount, FTE, we are relatively stable. There's been some slight fluctuations. Nothing in there, but you would expect that with the turnover that we've got. Clearly, we've had some challenges around sickness absence and agency spend. So if I just go on to the sickness absence position, I think what we've seen since probably around Q1 2024, we have seen a gradual, steady, incremental rise in sickness absence. So that you'll see now we are performing at around 8.3 days per FTE. And that has been obviously a trend that we've seen over the past 18 months, I would say. Again, that in itself is, yes, there are challenges there, but then again, when you compare us to the national local government average, we are still below the latest benchmark figure of 9.3 days per FTE. You'll also note, in terms of services, there are the frontline services, as you would expect, such as adults and children's, have the higher absence and the lower absence rates around with place and resources. Again, there's been a lot of interest of late of what are the causes of some of those absences, what are the reasons people are off, in line with national indicators, particularly across the public sector. Mental health is the predominant reason for absence, and that involves a number of reasons, so stress, anxiety, depression, and such like. And next along that is obviously musculoskeletal, and that is again a variety, whether that be back, hand, leg, etc., etc. And then we have a range of other health reasons, whether that be viral, etc., and that sort of thing. Obviously, we've got a number of initiatives that we have in place to try and, I guess, support employees that need either to retain to remain in work or get people to come back earlier. And obviously, we also have attendance management processes in order to manage those individuals that are meeting the requirements of the sickness absence policy in terms of those stages. If I move on to agency spend, again, we've seen an increase of 1.85 million to 2.33, which is a significant rise. Of that expenditure, we see that on contract is the larger reason for that, which in one sense is good because we're going through the matrix contract, which is where we've negotiated over the years lower rates that we charge for agency, but there is still quite a high number for off contract, as you can see there, around 700,000, and these will be providers that well, roles that we can't recruit to or we don't currently provide on a substantive basis, and I can go into that if needed. And then we have a breakdown then of the agency areas in terms of their spend. Children's around 1.2, resources 720, and adult and community wellbeing 339. And I guess just to recap on the reasons why, so educational psychology, education in general is a challenge for the organisation, and we are generally recruiting those people as agency through off contract in the main. And then there are usual sort of challenge areas that Martin's talked about and others have talked about, which is social work, as well as some of our 24/7 services like residential care. And then it's already been referenced in discussions today around lawyers and the challenges that there are within legal, as well as obviously within finance as well for some of those specialist roles. So I guess just key messages for members really. I think workforce retention remains strong and we are better than national benchmarks. Sickness absence is gradually increasing over time, but again we remain below that local government average. Agency is still a challenge, albeit we are in a better position than where we were around 12 months ago or just over 12 months ago. So I think there's still more to do, not rest on laurels in terms of managing that and trying to do the best we can. But I'll leave the report there, Chairman, and wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, can we start off with Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. The increase in agency spend and the plans in place to reduce for temporary staff, which is admirable for this year. But with LGR coming next year, then you're going to have to use a large number of agency staff. So will that be separately budgeted for next year?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I guess the ins and outs of the fund for, or how we're going to fund any additional capacity that we need for LGR is still to be determined in terms of what that looks like. But yeah, in terms of if there is a need to call on agency to help us get to where we need to be, then I'm sure we'll be in a position to be able to highlight what that cost is, rather than lump it necessarily within the general agency costs. But yeah, I think that decision yet has not been made as to how. I mean, things around capacity to deliver LGR are still up for discussion. I think there are things that perhaps, just talking from a sort of HR perspective, there are things that we could potentially stop doing which would not be necessarily requirements of the county council going forward, things like job evaluation, things like reorganisation, that would release some capacity. So I think the clear message is we're not wholly focused that we will definitely need agency. We probably will in some part, but not necessarily. But we can certainly look at that in terms of how we ensure that members can see what spend is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Just two questions, Mr. Chairman. Happy to do them individually or collectively.
Thank you.
I just wonder, what's the relationship, do you think, Tony, between the permanent headcount reducing but agency staff going up?
I mean, headcount's slightly gone down In terms of agency going up, I think there's a number of factors. Demand in terms of Heather may wish to comment, but demand in terms of like children's and the nature of the work. So where there's a need for psychological input, for example, educational psychological input, that clearly that isn't necessarily something that you can predict, I guess, within the year, and will be activity based. So I think that's one reason. I think inevitably when we go for off contract, we are to some extent hostage to fortune. I think we need staff, we need specialist staff. There is statutory work that needs to be done, and unfortunately, you will pay higher rates, and I think that will be another reason why the costs will be going up. So I hope that assists in some way, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Tony. I'll come back to you with your next question. No, well, we'll go to Councillor Brooks now. Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I was just wondering, is there anything that you can pinpoint for the illness, if something that's making them ill, for example, like the World Cup, did that go up or down? But my serious question is, have you thought about trying background music in sunrooms in case that has an impact on positive mental health at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I think perhaps up to the semi-final, I think you would have expected attendance to be good, but yeah, maybe. On a serious note, I think in terms of mental health, there are a number of reasons. We know from the ONS, so the Office of National Statistics, that across the public sector, the nature of the work within the public sector, particularly local government and NHS, that there is a greater demand, if you like, in terms of that being, whether that's sort of higher workloads, more emotional demands, as well as sort of public scrutiny, I guess. So I think that does have an impact, and I also think there is, as a public sector, there is a greater onus on us to employ people and provide lots of support for people who have long-term health conditions as well, and disabilities, and for those individuals to remain in employment. And so there's probably a greater emphasis on us because of the size of the organisations and the budgets that we have, to ensure there are reasonable adjustments in place and so on. So I think that in itself has an impact on the reasons why mental health is one of the bigger areas of reasons. In terms of potential solutions, obviously we've got the preventative and the reactive interventions. Obviously that's never enough because of the demand. Things like, I think there's no doubt that coming into the workplace itself is good for your mental health in general. I think working in teams, relating to colleagues is good, and I think that's why it's very important that we continue to work as a hybrid employer, whereby yes, there will be some times when people can work from home, but there is also that time where you must be in work and relate to your colleagues and collaborate. So as for things like music, I wouldn't know whether that, but I do know that there are local in place that work for certain teams. But I think that collaboration thing is the key thing for me.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Dilks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just following up Councillor Brooks. Football didn't come home, but local government reorganisation appears to be doing so. Unfortunately, I've got to say. And so I think my question is what impact, if any, do we feel that the rise in since 2024 in sickness is attributable to, if any, you know, I mean, it must be working for any local authority is, you know, right now. What is going on? What is the future? It is questionable. So if there are vacancies outside, I'm just wondering, you know, what is it? And I'm also talking as a district councillor, you know, seeing what's happening in my particular district. But I'm just wondering what's happening with the county there. I have got a second question, but I think the chairman would prefer me to on agency spending. Do you want me to leave that?
Yes, we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll leave you on the list.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Findlay.
Oh,
sorry, I do apologise. Tony, you never got a chance to talk.
I thought I did something there without moving my lips. Anyway, which will be a first. So, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, Councillor Dilks, for your question. I think undoubtedly uncertainty, change has an impact on the morale of the workforce. There is no doubt about that. I don't think that the gradual rise we have seen is attributable to LGR. I don't think that's the case, because I don't think until last month, really, there was the reality that this was going to impact on us as individuals and what that means. I think there's a role for all the organisations, whether that's ourselves, the districts, in terms of managing that with our workforce so that they understand, A, what's happening, B, when it's going to happen, C, what support is available, and provide that sort of leadership to ensure that there are no surprises, and that people understand when things are going to happen and how. And I think we're just getting to the bones of that now to try and make that happen. But yes, undoubtedly, I think change is a factor, and we've got to make sure that we manage that effectively.
Thank you, Tony. Sorry for cutting you off. Councillor Findlay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I looked at the list of absent reasons, and the one thing I didn't say on there was trying to get an appointment. So, as much as I appreciate you look at these figures, you think they're bad, but to be fair to people that suffer with all these conditions, the majority of these involve going to a doctor. To get a doctor's appointment, to find out what's up with you, regardless of whether you know it's any of these at all. So what I'm saying is, do you think that the medical system, from a surgery point of view, has an impact on these figures? Because I know myself, I can't just go to a doctor, get an appointment, and then turn up at 2 o'clock for that appointment. I have to get a queue in the morning and hopefully get an appointment, or spend an hour on the phone, and then if that doesn't work, I've got to try again the next day. So even though you might have one of these conditions and you repeatedly try and get a doctor's appointment, you could spend a lot of time, and then if you are successful in getting that appointment, they might tell you you've got other one of these, you know, one or more of these other ones, which means then you've got the same issue of going to different departments for different appointments. So one person might come away and say, I've got stress, but they could have underlying issues connected to multiple appointments. Is that considered within these figures, that people are wasting majority of their life trying to get an appointment rather than dealing with the issue?
Thank you for that. And I think for me, it's not a factor that we can see any evidence for. That doesn't mean to say that anecdotally the difficulty in, I guess the key thing is if you have a underlying condition or disability, and the inability to get help and support will probably have an impact on your return to work if you're off. So, or if something flares up or something like that. So I'm absolutely sure that will be a case in some instances. I'm absolutely sure of that. As for in general, I think because generally there's when we're talking about short-term sickness, there is a 7-day window in which you need to ensure you provide a fit note, sickness certificate from your GP. I think I don't think it would affect that per se, but I think the fact that there will be no doubt some of this will be about the inability to be treated and be supported to enable that return. So no doubt that will be a factor, but I've not seen any evidence of it, but no doubt there is. Thank you.
Yes, you can come back, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just obviously, I would have thought the way it is, that's how that would have impacted. Secondly, some of these cases on here, you do need doctors, regardless, categorically. Other ones, like mental health and stress and that, in-house support, in guidance to the right people, because like you say, keeping them in the workplace is vital, because that's really healthy for you, interacting with people, keeping yourself busy and occupied. So how far do you go with people that keep coming with, as much as they may be good at the job, because they're so good at the job, they're putting themselves under a lot of stress? Do you continuously monitor those people once they've suffered with, say, an anxiety attack or been off sick with stress? Do you continue to follow up supporting those people because they're good at their job? It worries me that you could potentially lose really good people that are so committed that they are mentally exhausted, needing help, and being ignored, which we know sometimes can happen. I'm not saying it happens here, but we know it can happen.
Thank you for that. Obviously, the model we have in this organisation is leaders look after the staff that they manage and ensure that they're aware, and the development and training that we give leaders and managers in general is ensuring that they're fully aware of those situations that you've highlighted, where we have individuals that are unwell with mental health conditions, whatever that may be. And I think that's in creating the right culture for a supportive environment, so that people, A, will raise their hand because there's still stigma about mental health, and B, to then be receptive to support. So, already I think it's fair to say there's been a long-standing expectation that managers and leaders are ensuring the health and well-being of their staff is utmost. And we do the monthly one-to-ones. It's part of that standard template. That's one of the first things that's on there as an aid memoir, if you like, as a reminder. We have in-house services, of course, which at times can prevent people going off. So we've invested not significant amounts of money, but small amounts of money in the counselling service, whereby they can do specialist training. They've done specialist training of things around trauma, and certain interventions that they can do, like eye movement therapy, which is called EMDR. So don't ask me to explain what the other parts of that mean, but essentially there are psychological interventions that they've been trained to do. But it is only a small team and it is limited. But I think going back to the main ethos of your question, I think fundamentally it's about ensuring that we have a culture where people can say, I'm not coping. And we make a judgment on terms of what help does that individual need, if they need anything, what support they need, and ensure that we have a sort of very receptive environment. And the staff survey would suggest we do have that. So in the staff survey from December, we had something in the region of, I think it was maybe closer to 90%, between 80 and 90% of people would recommend their line manager as supportive and everything, which I think is a real positive. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Just on that note, I think the problem might be here, it might help, and just thinking out loud here, for individual people to try and get a doctor's note, as Councillor Finney said, to get an appointment, would it not be prudent to have a mechanism where we can send a member of staff to a specific doctor who will see them a lot quicker, and not potentially have our own doctor, but have one that we can obviously no doubt pay, but that would mean that they can get a certificate quicker, they can get seen quicker. Because the other problem you've got is when you do get to see a doctor, you get variations of quality and variations of outcome because they're all different. So would that not be an idea to have a mechanism where anybody who's off sick, they can see, I won't say the LCC's doctor, but one that they recommend that they can get to see straight away. Then potentially if they have got issues, then they can be put to the right area. Because otherwise what happens is that, as Councillor Finney said, they could be off work for a length of time, not so much with a specific problem, but because they've not had their specific problem actually diagnosed. Is that something that we do, or is that something we could look at? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think generally it's not something we do. I think the issue we would have is around patient choice, in terms of and confidentiality and the right of individuals to go to their local GP if they so wish, and I think there would be some challenges with it. That's not to say it wouldn't be impossible to have some form of service available. I think it's not something that we've ever thought. Certainly, obviously, we have occupational health, which we do use for urgent cases sometimes, where perhaps we need their input straight away. But I don't think we could open that up to more general challenges that we've got. So I think that's not to say we couldn't look at something like that, but it would just be the cost challenge, the patient choice challenge, and such like. So I think it's one we could potentially take away as a potential. There are some schemes in operation in some organisations where, in order to call in sick, but this is more of a preventative option, you call a organisation that, for example, so rather than call your line manager, you call into a nurse. You get put through to a nurse, as an example, and they will do an assessment with you there and then and have that conversation. So there are some models out there. Obviously, they cost money. There are, but obviously, the evidence we haven't got is whether those, by doing that, that's saving the council money in terms of that person coming back to work, etc. So, but that's one thing we could take away as a suggestion. Thank you,
Tony. Yeah, I literally in Spalding I saw a sign for a private GP. It's the first time I've seen that. Private dentist, yeah, not private GP, and it's something that, in my industry, I work in. There are insurances you take out, life insurances where you get a free second opinion, free GP services. I think, as you might want to take this back as an idea, that if people are struggling to get to see their doctor, which I've not seen my doctor for 8 years, I get text by my doctor. I don't see one anymore. I don't think they exist. I think they've all left the country, I think. But if there was an option where if you are struggling to get to see your GP, we have got a option, because otherwise what happens is that then it can just drag on. You can't get, it doesn't do them any good. I know obviously without certificate they can't get the sick pay, etc., etc. But it would probably be a good backup to have. So it could be an insurance company you do it through, Bupa, for example. The other ones are available. It could be something like that which could act, because what you want to do is get to a situation where the member of staff is literally, they're diagnosed super quick, and therefore they can get the treatment they need and they're back to work as soon as possible. And I can see, especially with how things have changed recently, it can be worth looking at. Anyway, off my soapbox. Councillor Hill.
2 questions. First one is on sickness absence. Well, obviously the council, against our wishes, increased the target from 7.5 to 8.8. Surprise, surprise, the sickness levels are rising. Now, we always felt the justification that, well, what that makes us about average for the public sector was particularly weak and actually very much lacking in ambition. You did say, Tony, that when you started that the majority of the reasons for sickness were mental health and musculoskeletal. Well, can I refer you to page 169? That's not correct. The majority of absences are caused by stress, by far the highest. And actually, if you add stress and anxiety together, 14,500 days are lost. 14,500 days are lost to stress and anxiety. So I'm not saying all of those, but there is a massive, there's nothing to do with mental health, and I think we all accept there's an issue, but that is quite damning actually. So I don't know why you were telling us it was mental health. It's not mental health is the major problem, it's stress, and also number 3, anxiety. So what, you know, I don't know why you told us something which wasn't quite correct when it's in this, and by the way, I found the actual appendices very helpful, but there's obviously an issue there, and it's been touched on, that that's probably where stress and anxiety probably is an area where perhaps you should be looking.
Thanks, Councillor Hill. I guess in terms of my conclusion on top reasons, mental health in the report, obviously anxiety, depression, stress, I include that as mental health. I don't differentiate between stress and anxiety as being something different to a mental health condition. So
that's not how it's reported.
It is
I mean,
in the.
there is a difference between mental health, and we all understand that, and stress and anxiety. It's surely.
Well, I think it all forms under mental health, and the paper that I've done on page 160 as the top reasons for sick and absence, I did put in brackets including anxiety, depression, stress. So I've lumped it all together. I could obviously differentiate and take them out, but I think in the main, if you were to ask the Royal College of Psychiatrists, they'd probably tell you that anxiety and stress were things that were recognised as mental health conditions, probably.
I'll tell you what, I'll go to Councillor Collier, and I'll come back to you if that's okay, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I was just wondering, thank you for all that you do, by the way, and for this report. Perhaps that, what Councillor Hill was saying about, perhaps on page 60, glasses on, 169 is perhaps a little bit misleading in the fact you've clumped it all together in one place and you separate it in another place. But it's the facts are there, whatever the figures are really. It's still a worry, isn't it? And I see we have below national average there with our absences, but what else are you looking at? We've got to start looking outside the box, if you like, to incentives maybe to get people to stay in work. They've done this in schools. I don't 100% agree with all of it, but there's other ways we must think about to keep people in work, to help them. What else are you looking at, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Collier. I think in terms of why do people come to work, fundamentally we pay people to come to work, and there'll be varying degrees of I don't get paid enough or I do, but I think fundamentally that is the key component in why people should come to work. I think in terms of how do we ensure that, as you quite rightly say, we maintain people in work, it's about that old term, it's about that psychological contract. People want to come to work because they are supported, there's a good culture, there is, and there's loads of evidence out there to support this, that, you know, that if people feel safe in work, if people are able to get the right support from their line manager, that's not to say, obviously, you let people do what they want to do. It's clearly there has to be clear boundaries, and there has to be, you know, that's what we've got disciplinary procedures for and so on. But fundamentally, the evidence is there. If you provide for a more caring, supportive employment, that's not letting people off either where performance is not sufficient. You do get lower sickness absence rates compared to the averages, and as I say, there is evidence out there. In terms of other things, I think, you know, what we're trying to do is, obviously we have, like I mentioned previously on one of the questions previously, which was around having initiatives and interventions that can try and help maintain people at work. So if you're getting counselling perhaps, or psychological support perhaps, if you have a mental health issue, then you clearly maybe, and your employer recognises that and was supporting you, they're more likely to remain and continue in employment. But I think, 20 years ago, you probably saw some organisations whereby they would have an attendance allowance for people to be at work, and they would lose it when they're off sick. So I would never want to go back to anything like that, because I don't think they work. And fundamentally, we pay people to come to work to do a job. But for me, it's about the role of the employer as being an exemplar in terms of how it treats people, but making sure that people want to work for us for the right reasons. That would be my view.
Thank you. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. Pages 163 to 164, we've lost 7 in corporate from 40 down to 33 between quarter 2 and quarter 3, 2025. That's 18.75% of total staff have left that directorate, far in excess of other directorates. And I acknowledge that it's a small directorate, so a small change can have a high impact on percentages. And I'm sure you're conducting exit interviews as well as staff surveys. So what are you doing to mitigate any obvious reasons why people don't want to work in corporate? And what trends are you identifying, and to make sure that any remaining staff are not unduly burdened through taking on additional responsibilities and adding to their stress? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. So, can I just ask which part of the paper you said 163? Did you?
Yeah, it's Appendix A. Yeah.
Appendix A, right, okay. I think, obviously, we have some movement within resources where people will move to different parts of the organisation. But if we're talking about, hence that's why, but if we're talking about levers, potentially, there will be, we've had, in the last 12 months, we've had things like restructures and those sorts of things where there has been an element of turnover due to redundancy, those sorts of things within resources. In terms of exit interviews, we do exit interviews, and despite our turnover being quite low, we do look at those. We don't always get the greatest response rates, usually around 30% of the total leavers. We're trying to improve on that in terms of making the exit interview questionnaire more user-friendly, less questions, trying to get to the nub of the thing. But generally, the reason why a lot of people leave in resources, for example, is one of the top reasons is going to another employer, pay, those sorts of things generally tend to be some of the challenges that reasons for leaving. So there's still more work to do on that, I think. But I would say generally we have, because we have a low turnover rate in general, that I think if we had a much higher turnover rate, then I think the exit interview becomes even more important in that scenario. But we are looking at that and trying to improve it, if that answers the question.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. I know Andrew wants to come in.
Yeah, partly.
Yeah.
Partly, yeah. But where does this report into? Which scrutiny committee gets this, and where are they going to do actually a deeper dive into this? Because this is quite concerning when you see it. When you see that it was described as a brown blob. I think on mine it's an orange bar. Who's looking at this, and who's looking at the exit interviews, and are they? I think you alluded to the kind of the voluntary, informal nature.
Yeah.
of people answering the questions. This is really important
Yeah.
as a deliverer of public services and as an employer. You know, I would hope back when I was an employee that I'd go to work for more than the pay packet. There's more to work, you know, than just pay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So where are we gathering this and what are we doing with it?
Yeah, I mean, we can bring things like exit interviews here. They can come to OSMB for updates. I mean, on the corporate, where it says 18.75, corporate is very, very small. Very, very small. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So I think that's why it looks higher, much higher than the rest of the organisation. But, you know, in terms of monitoring, we expect, you know, one of the purposes of HR and HR advisors is to work with services to monitor those things and understand where we think we've got challenges, whether that's through intelligence, via, you know, not through your normal routes. Some of that can be informal intelligence via managers, that we think we've got concerns in a particular area, or it's through some of the more formal mechanisms where you might, for example, get high turnover, high sickness, or you know, that sort of thing. So that's usually the avenues that we got. But in terms of responsibility, you know, we're here to support managers and we do the oversight on that.
Andrew, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks. I suppose I think it's 6 staff that represent a large 18% of the total, but like I say, it is a small number. I think from recollection, that's probably due to the reductions that were made in the senior leadership. So that will be coming through in terms of some of the numbers on corporate. We've also, as part of corporate as a directorate going forward, this is some legacy reporting that needs to be updated on Business World, and where we've moved some staff within corporate into wider parts of resources. So through the year, we'll continue to see that, as well as corporate as an entity it removes, and it's all under resources. In terms of the monitoring, overview and scrutiny management board is absolutely the area that we would bring this. This is when we met back in June, we talked around areas to bring to OSMB. This was one of the areas that we start to bring through to have these discussions. So you're assured a detailed HR management information report that feeds this, goes out to every head of service across the council every month. You can drill down into all this level of detail, right into individual teams, have all the numbers and such behind it. So beyond a scrutiny review of it, leaders within the organisation have access to this information to make sure, you know, going through the relevant absence management procedures, having the exit interviews, carrying out appraisals, that sort of information. So it's widely available to the senior leadership to be able to manage those issues that you talk about. But certainly I think the numbers will reflect some of the changes that we've made, like I say, as a part of reducing the senior leadership, and there'll be ongoing changes within corporate as it's removes as a separate directorate moving forward.
Thank you, and just on that, thank you for that comprehensive response. I mean, it is, you know, all our responsibilities, and it's certainly something we wanted to do is to ensure that Lincolnshire County Council was an employer of choice. And it's concerning when you see that. And I appreciate that when you get down to a small team, if you start bringing data forward, it has to be anonymised, and you get through then to, you know, if you've got qualitative data, that it can start to get a little bit close to people being identified, which we don't want. But it is really important, I think, that if we start to see that Lincolnshire County Council is hemorrhaging staff, we need to know why.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we can build in this reporting going forward. I don't think we're seen as we're hemorrhaging staff. I think we are, like I say, the turnover rates are, you know, relatively consistent, and we continue to look to do what we can to attract and retain staff moving forward.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Hill, you wanted to come back on something.
I'll comment first. Obviously, the financial woes of children's services. When you look at this, despite employing 2,000 people, children's services are actually spending £1.2 million on agency staff. So a bit of a clue there. I think there's an issue there. I mean, I'm not against agency staff, but it does seem a lot. The question is, why has there been a clear out in public protection? because half of them have gone. So is there a particular issue there? You're looking
Councillor Hill.
referring to page 166.
Heather.
Public protection, 13%, 24, 20% leaving.
Can I, sorry.
Heather.
But we're so eager, everybody wants to answer. We think it was part of the service that moved to Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue. But if not, we can get a more comprehensive response. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Heather.
And just on the agency spend in children's, just to remind you, we took the decision not to have council employed educational psychologists, and we have to do that off contract because they're not employed through the contract. So a large chunk of that spend is the educational psychologists, and then you know you're right, there's a big link to the demand, isn't there, and the need to keep caseloads manageable for social workers, and but again we take it on board.
Thank you, Heather. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to see, could we have the data from 2019 year on year up to the present day to see illness and reasons for leaving if possible, please? Thank you.
Yeah, we can provide information, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I did say I had a second question. When
You did, I haven't forgotten.
No problem, Chairman. And it's been a good discussion. Before I get on to agency, I do share the concerns about the orange blob or the brown blob, whatever it is in here. You know, I take the point that you say it's a small directorate, and we're only talking about 6 staff. But if it's 6 staff in 1 quarter, it does, in a small thing. Clearly, 1 in 5 is you know, an area of concern, and I'm not sure how many of them have been replaced, or, which leads me on to the agency spend, how many of them are replaced by agency staff, albeit in a temporary basis. I know that agency spend did start falling in 24-25 from a peak. But obviously it's of some concern that it's increased by 26% on one period, one quarter, in Q1, up by nearly $500,000 in that 1 quarter. So I think my questions really are, whilst I appreciate that the full-time employment is down by 30 in Q1, but the agency staff is up by 26%. What's the total cost of employment? Has it gone up or down, or is it the same? And then really on the wider question of agency and interim staff, I know it can be quite lucrative being an interim staff member. What are the costs per individual? Heather mentioned particularly the educational psychologists. What is the sort of average, and what's the, how much are we paying for some of these people, and what's the longest time that agency staff are in post for? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks.
Thank you.
Tony.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dilks. So just to break down the question, I suppose, just in terms of the general discussion we've just had around on the orange or brown blob, whatever you want to call it, corporate, please bear in mind as well that there are some staff in there that now work in the GLCCA. So they would have been on secondment and then subsequently moved. So that would be one reason why some of that is empty, is it like, or not there. But going back to agency spend, I think in terms of why has it gone up and employments have gone down, and why has it gone up to such I think I'd probably go back to the fact that some of it is activity based. So if activity and demand for example, educational psychology goes up within a particular quarter, that will because we don't have directly employed educational psychologists, that will be one reason why, not saying the whole reason, but one reason why that would then go up, sort of in direct opposition to the fact we've got stable turnover and all those sorts of things. So that'll be one reason. As for average pay and longevity, we do, in terms of average pay, unfortunately I'm not a nerd enough to be able to give you that information here, but I can get that for you, no problem. In terms of longevity, we do have some agency staff that are on contract that do work quite a significant amount of time, sometimes up to 12 months. What we do in those situations is we look at ways in which to try and reduce the costs to us through various mechanisms, such as trying to get them over to the matrix contract. We have been quite successful in getting a number of staff, agency staff from the children's services onto our actual employment. And I don't know if colleagues from children's want to comment on that.
I can comment on that. So we've been really successful in terms of converting some of our agency staff into permanent posts within Lincolnshire. We offer a number of incentives that we've had in place now for a number of years through corporate funding around paying enhancements for those posts in the most challenging to recruit teams, and also growing our own social workers through our apprenticeship scheme, which has been really successful. So we really keep an eye on our agency numbers. We are potentially going to see a little bit of an increase because we are increasing the number of social work posts that we've got. As Heather alluded to, some of that is demand-led. However, some of it is about the social care reforms that every local authority across the country is having to implement, and that requires recruitment to some specialist roles that we've not had before. People will maybe be aware that we've been a pathfinder in that area, so we're a little bit ahead of the game. But as a consequence of people being promoted and moving into those roles, we've needed to backfill, and so we've used agency staff in those circumstances. But we review that really regularly. We probably do have within children some agency staff that have been with us for longer than we would like, and that is because for continuity for children and families, if somebody is covering a post and then someone goes on maternity leave, we would rather keep the same agency worker that we know, who has relationships, is good at what they do, so they will move and possibly cover a number of different roles within a period of time, rather than simply covering one post, if that makes sense. But it does have an impact on the time that they're employed with us.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Dale?
Very briefly, if I may, thank you for that. Presumably, if we then hire the agency staff, and we have to pay the agency something to do that, I assume. It was just on the cost of local government reorganisation linked to agency staff. It was asked earlier, I think it was the Vice Chairman asked about the do we actually expect? I mean, I'm conscious that the winning bid in Lincolnshire, the City of Lincoln's bid was estimated to cost 40 odd million to get to where we want to get, which is apparently then going to save us a lot of money. So it's 40 million odd to get there, and more is it? But it is about. Do we expect that with the coming of LGR, that agency staff costs are going to rise?
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I'm going to hand over to my learned friend here to the left to answer that question about the potential contingencies we've got around that. But I think Michelle may want to comment, and then I can always add if needs be.
Yeah, so this isn't specifically around agency costs, but there is clearly a cost around the implementation of the new organisations as a result of local government reorganisation. And you'll be aware from announcements that we've made that Andrew Crookham, our Chief Exec's been made the Senior Responsible Officer for implementing the change that the government have asked us to implement. Part of the initial work that Andrew will be doing is with the Chief Execs across all of the councils is looking at an implementation team and an implementation budget, and clearly that will need to go through the due process in terms of the Joint Committee and the Shadow Authority to ratify those things, with contributions being made from all parties involved in that reorganisation, but none of that has been agreed yet, and none of that has been set out yet. But that's work currently underway to kind of set that out. I would expect, so not all of those costs will be staff in terms of implementation. So something we will have to include in that initial budget is things like the cost of the elections for next year, the cost of the members' allowances for the shadow period. So quite a significant cost of that is nothing to do with our staffing. Clearly, there will need to be people released from all of the 8 organisations involved in the reorganisation, and there may need to be some agency staff for backfilling some of those roles to make sure that we continue with our business as usual and end the organisations, the 8 councils, well, whilst putting the necessary effort into setting up the 2 new unitaries and the fire authority. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Matthews.
Just to give you a little bit of background as to what we're doing with LGR, the government and the costs that it's going to be. The government has given effectively both unitary authorities 900,000. So that's how much they really think it's good. Yeah. So that will get lost in just agency fees, I would imagine. But yeah, that's where the government think we're at the moment. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think it'll all come out in the wash. Any further questions? Excellent. I propose the board has reviewed the report, and we have been assured that the performance of the council workforce metrics for the 26-27 quarter. Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. That is carried. Item 10, Overview and Scrutiny Management Board Work Programme. This item is on pages 171 to 182 of the agenda pack and sets out the work programme of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. The actions required by the board are to review and agree the board's work programme set out in this report, highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which should be considered for inclusion in the work programme. The report will be presented by Tracy Johnson, Senior Security. Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Tracy.
Thank you. I think you did the last meeting. Thank you, Chairman. The next meeting of the board is the 24th of September. We currently have, I think it's 5 items listed. We have a progress report in relation to LGR, as we've just been discussing. There will also be a pre-decision report on the procurement of a contract for telephony services partner, and that is for a Councillor Catton decision between the 5th and 13th of October. And the committee will also be receiving performance reports in relation to communications and engagement, information management and technology, and corporate systems. Happy to take any suggestions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tracy. I'd like to invite comments on the work programme. Councillor Smith, do we have any speakers? Councillor Hill.
Yeah, could I just address the elephant in the room, which is the requires improvement rating for adult social care. So I suppose from my perspective, it seems that it's tried to be corporately contained within the adult care scrutiny and directorate. This is actually a big issue for the whole council, because the risk is that once you start getting requires improvements in one place, other inspectors who come along start looking with more vigour to see if there's so what I'm not seeing in either in our programme or indeed the programme for adult care is how that's being addressed. Is there what is the improvement plan to address the issues raised? And I do think this committee needs to take oversight of it, as I'm sure the executive are as well, because it is a corporate risk and it's something we do need to address. And unfortunately, Martin's not here. So what are the sort of, in terms of overview on behalf of the council, what I suggest that this committee starts taking an overview, because it is a corporate issue.
Tracy.
Thank you. Yes, it falls under the adult care and public health. They have had an item added onto their 23rd of September agenda on the CQC outcomes. So there is going to be an item coming up next month.
That's my point entirely. It's not just an issue for adult care. And actually, as you know, we've long time ago, before I became leader, we had a similar situation, and the whole council needs to come together to support, to improve. And it's really key. So it can't be, I mean, I was a bit shocked. I was waiting. We got an email from Martin saying, well, don't worry, this is all very good, without the report. And you had to dig down into the Adult Care Scrutiny Committee. And it's a corporate issue. So I hear what you're saying, but I think as the corporate oversight, we do really, as this committee, need some sort of oversight what's going on. In particular, the improvement plan, which will need to be put into place. So I'm addressing to, I mean, obviously the Chief Exec not here, but I'm just making that plea, really.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Hill. Currently, it has been decided it would go through adult scrutiny, but this item is to discuss your suggestions, and we'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you. The bells. Any further questions? Okay. I propose that we approve the planned work programme and subject to any consideration of any items highlighted in today's discussions. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. This is agreed. Items for information only. Item 11, the Councillor Community Grants Fund Update Report. Report on pages 183 to 186, which is not for discussion, provides a progress update on implementation of delivery of the Council Community Grant Fund, including the current financial position, activity across application activity across both funding streams and progress to date. A discussion report on the Council Community Grant Fund will be brought to the meeting on the 17th of December. The action required is to note the update of the Council Community Grant Fund. Should you wish to comment on the update, please contact the Head of Communications and Engagement following today's meeting. Item 12, Scrutiny Committee's Work Programme. The report on pages 187 to 216. The report on pages 187 to 216 provides an overview of the work programme of the other scrutiny committees that the board has oversight of. Discussions on details of particular items are appropriately held at the relevant meeting of the scrutiny committee. The action required is to note the planned work programme for the scrutiny committees. Should you wish to comment on any of these work programmes, please contact the senior scrutiny officer following today's meeting. On that note, that now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.